Labor MPs in Sydney and Melbourne could be under threat from a grassroots campaign aiming to empower Australian Muslims seeking justice for Palestinians. That's not their only reason for forming, but it does seem to be one of the primary reasons. The group, called the Muslim Vote, says it will put forward candidates at the next election with seats in their sights in Western Sydney, held by Cabinet Ministers Tony Burke and Jason Clare, and also in the inner Melbourne seat of Wills. Now, that seat is held by Peter Khalil, the Labor member for Wills, and of course he's also under threat from the Greens, so he's kind of got a double barrel going on there, and I want to welcome him in the studio, which is my favourite place to welcome anyone. Welcome.
Good morning, Patricia.
How big a threat is this movement to you specifically?
Well, I wouldn't characterise in those terms because democracy is contested. Elections are contested and candidates run in elections, and as it should be, because it is a contest of ideas and perspectives. It's also a judgment. People will judge our policies, whether it be the additional 25% renewals we've put on the grid, the $32 billion we've invested in housing, or our foreign policy. People will make a judgment on how that's impacted them, but as well on the local, on the incumbent and the work that, say, I've done to serve the community in my term and how I've assisted people. So people will make judgments based on a lot of things and around the contest of those ideas.
But it's harder now, isn't it?
It's always hard, Patricia. It's always hard. It's always difficult.
Let's be frank with the audience.
I'm being very frank.
It's never been as hard for you.
Absolutely. Every election that I've run has been difficult. It's always been a fight against the Greens, mainly because the Liberals come third in my electorate. So that's nothing new for me. And I work very, very hard to represent my community, to assist thousands of people, to make a difference to their lives, to make their lives better. And that's done at the local level in support for NDIS or pensioners or taxation issues or immigration and support for refugees and asylum seekers, which I've done a lot of, but also at the national level where you contribute to shaping policies as well, whether it be our foreign policy or our climate change policy. So that's part of the job. And I don't resolve from doing that hard work. It's part of our responsibility and our role as MPs.
You've got a high percentage of people in your electorate who are Muslim, around 10%. 3 times that of the broader population. They are really angry, aren't they, at the Labor Party? And you have been targeted.
Well, I've engaged very, very closely, and I have for years, with the Muslim communities in my electorate. There are many communities, and people come from very different ethnic backgrounds. There is sectarian difference. There's Sunni and Shiite. People are either, Pakistani is very different than Lebanese. There are a lot of different communities, a lot of ethnic and socioeconomic diversity as well.
But does the one thing that combines all of them is this passion for Palestine?
Yeah, and I've engaged particularly with the communities around the pain that is being felt around the Gaza, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the war in Gaza, and listen to their concerns. And that's an important part of my role because that helps shape our policies as well as I engage in our caucus and also with our ministers and with the cabinet ministers and so on and the Prime Minister. So that's an important element of the engagement with your community. But also there are a variety of views amongst the community as well. They're not one monolithic block, and you represent many different communities as well within the Muslim Australian community.
Do you agree, though, that they all have a pretty unified voice when it comes to saying that Labor should have a stronger position when it comes to the war and on Palestinian statehood?
Well, our position on Palestine, and as you know, I've been on this program, I think back in November, calling for a ceasefire, and we voted for a ceasefire in the United Nations some 7 or 8 months ago. We have a position that has been agreed to by the caucus and which we've helped shape based on reflecting the views of community members as well, which I've been involved with, that we support Palestinian recognition as part of a two-state solution and a just and enduring peace. That is a principled position. But importantly, Patricia, that has included real material work on the ground to make a difference, so increasing humanitarian aid, alleviating the human suffering. The Prime Minister calling for an end to the conflict with counterparts
all of
within
that
the international
might be
community.
True, but clearly it's still not good enough.
We all want an end to the conflict. And does anyone really doubt that the government or any of us don't want to see an end to this conflict? Every effort is being made diplomatically to ensure the parties reach a ceasefire, to end this conflict. We've voted in the UN multiple times for a ceasefire. The international diplomatic efforts by the Foreign Minister, the Prime Minister, have been calling on Israel to cease the operations in Rafah, to end the conflict, to reach a ceasefire, for the hostages to be released.
So what's your reaction then when the Greens leader, Adam Ban, I heard him say just the other day that Labor has put more sanctions on Fatima Payman, the WA senator, than on Benjamin Netanyahu?
You'd have to ask him. And I think the important
But what's your reflection on the point in that
important
statement?
point is this. There is a lot of politicisation and weaponisation of this issue for short-term political gain. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in Palestinian self-determination, Palestinian statehood and justice, and a two-state solution and peace. Everything I've done as an MP, as a lowly backbencher MP, is to try and influence our policies to reach that outcome. And that is real material work. Putting up motions in the Senate have no real material impact on what's happening on the ground. But actually helping Palestinians get out of Rafah, which we've done to get back into my electorate, family members to be reunited, makes a difference to people's lives. Increasing humanitarian aid to over 100 million makes a difference to those lives. Calling with the international community to end the conflict, to end the fighting, makes a difference. That increasing pressure that is being put on through the international community, through our diplomatic efforts, makes a difference. These are things that will have a material outcome. And I actually have argued very strongly that Australia should play a very constructive and substantive role in doing what we can to contribute to Palestinian statehood going forward and for peace, and a just and enduring peace. It is a sound and principled decision. One, by the way, and I said earlier that Senate motions don't really have a material impact. We still put that position up in the Senate last week, and the Greens and the Liberals voted against it. You'll have to ask them why, but I hazard a guess it's got to do with politics. Not about outcomes.
Let me ask you this. Senator Fatima Payman, the WA senator who is now excluded from the Labor caucus, has enlisted the help of a well-known crossbench preference whisperer, Glenn Drury. His advice for the Muslim group is reportedly to harvest anger and dissatisfaction. She is reportedly talking to him and also this group. Should she be expelled?
Well, Fatima's a respected colleague, and I've spoken to Fatima in the past.
When's the last time you talked to her?
I haven't spoken to her recently, not this past week or two, but I've spoken to her in the past about the issues, about the war and so on at some length. And she's a respected colleague. I would hope she would come back to the Labor team.
But how can she? I really want to figure this out. How can she if she's been talking to Glenn Drury, the preference whisperer, and talking to people about running candidates against people like you?
Well, I mean, look, Patricia, she has been, as you saw the decision made by the Prime Minister, suspended from caucus for a period of time. But the Prime Minister also said very clearly that he would welcome her back into the team.
Even after this, I want to get clarity.
Well, I'm not sure. You'd have to ask the leadership about that.
Well, let me ask this. Would you be comfortable sitting in the caucus with somebody who has had conversations to unseat you?
Well, politics is a tough game, but there are diversity of views, and
that's a next level diversity of view.
My relationship with Fatima, and I always wanted more diverse voices in this parliament. When I first arrived here, I was one of the few people of a person of colour. In the last election, we've had many people being elected, and there's more diversity. But diversity doesn't just come from your skin colour; it comes from your background, your faith, your socioeconomic background. We need more people in politics, maybe to build up against the trust deficit that we get in democracy, because this diversity of views makes our politics better.
Okay. With respect, you haven't answered my question, which is, given she's done this, would you be comfortable?
I'm not going to make a decision about Fatima's future.
Would you be comfortable sitting with someone who's been scheming against people like you retaining your seat?
Are you talking about politics and scheming? Like, everyone in politics kind of does some of these types of things.
Has anyone else in the caucus done this to you?
I know this is going to sound strange, Patricia, but I'm probably unusual, but I forgive people if people make mistakes all the time, and it's important to forgive, and I think we should do more of that in public life as well. People do the wrong thing sometimes. I'm not perfect. I'm sure Fatima isn't. So
if she has done that, it's been reported. I have not spoken to her directly, so I'm just putting it in that framework. If she has, Glenn Drury has certainly said that he's been working on this. If she were to repent and say, hey, it was the wrong thing to do, you'd welcome her back?
I would love to see Fatima back in our caucus.
Even after that?
Well, people make mistakes all the time, and it's important to forgive people. And I think, the thing is, there's so much, pressure being put on people around these issues, so much politicisation of this. In the end, what we all want is probably the same thing, which is to end to human suffering and to end to a conflict overseas. And we're doing everything we can at the diplomatic level through being a party of government. And I think that's far more effective than running stunt motions in the Senate or, and I should say too, some of these political parties and minor parties like the Greens, you know, the spread of misinformation and disinformation, the peddling of lies, frankly, to confuse people about what has actually been done or not. I'm happy to debate our foreign policy, whether we've done enough or whether we've done too much or whatever it might be. And that's an important debate in our democracy, but it has to be based on the objective facts of what we've actually done. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of disinformation spread around these issues, and we're battling that as well. And you know this, the fracturing of the media and social media and the way the algorithms work. So again, I think we need to be a bit kinder to each other and more forgiving for each other and a better type of politics.
Peter Khalil, it's been great to speak to you.
Thanks, Patricia.
Of course, I know where you are from well, and actually got a text message saying it's colder in Melbourne today than in Canberra.
Oh my God, that's a miracle.
Lucky we're here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks.
Labor MP Peter Khalil there, seat of Wills, and of course he's being challenged very much by the Greens and potentially by new forces as well. You're listening to Breakfast. Anna Henderson is Chief Political Correspondent with the SBS News. Hello.
Hello, good morning. Isn't that interesting? They're still wanting to bring Senator Payman back.
Very interesting. So give me your analysis of what's going on here because, you know, after that kind of level of, what would be seen as pretty ill-disciplined behaviour against your own colleagues, Peter Khalil saying he's willing to forgive her if she's done that.